Hi, I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist with PossibleNOW, and I'm speaking with Gates Marshall. He's Manager of Security Systems for CompliancePoint, and we're talking about the regulations of storing data under the new GDPR regulations. So talk about that. Like, how do I store the data? What are the things I need to consider?
So there's really two big areas where challenges exist, and one of those is in kind of governance and operations. Typically, we don't think about what are we going to do with this data from the point we get it until the point we remove it, at the point we're getting it or before we're getting it. And we kind of get this data and we start storing it and we do all this cool stuff with it. And then later we try to figure out what do we do with it. And that's not going to work anymore under GDPR. So there's a principle of privacy by design, which really means that before you start, you have factored what is it, why do I need it, how long am I going to keep it, how do I justify keeping it, and then you design your systems and your technology in such a way to facilitate removing that data at the point that you no longer have an authorized reason to have the data. And that's a really big shift for organizations who traditionally just want to have data, keep data, grow data, and the data set just keeps growing because you can do cool stuff with it, and that's not going to be possible under GDPR.
And what's interesting is we work with companies and you'll find them falling into two camps. One that says only collect it if you need it, and another camp that says collect everything.
Sure.
And so this changes the way that you have to think about that.
Absolutely, it does. And the other really big ticket item that I think are going to challenge a lot of organizations is how do we have the technology implemented within our current systems and software and applications to be able to support all these new consumer rights, whether that's the right to be forgotten or the right for transparency, the right for data portability. So these are all great consumer rights, but when we go back to look at our software and our databases and our implementations, the ability to actually facilitate that in an efficient manner is an incredible challenge.
And I can see that specifically with the silos of technology. So if right to be forgotten means I'm supposed to be forgotten across the enterprise and there's information in multiple places, how do you consolidate that and make it work?
Great question. So the right to be forgotten doesn't mean just erase one instance of my data. It means erase all instances, all replicas of my data, even data that maybe I've given to you and you've given to a service provider. All that gets encompassed and needs to be addressed, and that's something that's not easy to do. To start out, the first thing you need to know is a data map. Where is the data? How many people have I given it to? How many databases is it located in? How do we get access to that? Who has access to it? What are they currently using it for? So to determine just kind of where is it and how are we using it, that's the first big step towards being able to figure out, are we keeping it too long or can we keep it longer?
And so it sounds like it's not only just a question of storage and systems, it's also process, procedure, governance that goes around this as a wrapper.
Absolutely. If you were to look at it from a percentage standpoint, GDPR is probably 70 to 75% governance and operations, those processes and the procedures, the how we're handling the data in the proper manner. And then technology is probably the other 25%. I don't want to diminish the criticality and how hard it is to have the technology support the governance and the operations side, but if you were just looking at kind of where you have to apply it, it spreads across, and none of these things are bolt-ons. These are all things that need to be factored from the ground up to be able to really implement them in a way that's going to be effective.
If I'm an organization and I already have a lot of data on my customer, so you're talking about from the ground up, how do I determine, or what's an approach for going through and saying what is it and where is it and how can I use it?
Well, one option would be to completely erase everything and start over. If that's not
that
palatable,
sounds a little scary. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if that's not palatable, it's still the same first step, doing the data mapping, figure out what we're doing with it and how we're using it, and then go back and trace that to the business function and determine, do we really need that? If, for example, maybe we had a contract and it was for a year, and here we are 3 years later and we still have all this data from it, there's really no justifiable reason to keep that. And so at some point after you figure out where everything is, you're going to have some spring cleaning to do.
And in that example of having data that I only needed for a year, but maybe I've been using it for 3, are there any requirements under GDPR for me to tell the person I'm collecting that data that I've erased it or that I'm getting rid of it?
So the first thing there is you have to have consent to have the data. And when you get consent, you're telling them why you're using that data. If you told them that you were using it to, say, fulfill the contract and the contract was for a year, the expectation from the consumer is that you are removing that data after the year. So it's not necessarily that you need to have an explicit notification to them that you've removed the data. If it's just through a normal course of business that you've determined, hey, I no longer have authorization, let's remove this data. On the other hand, if you have a request for right to be forgotten and that sort of thing, so this is where the consumer can really come and say, hey, I want you to erase everything you have on me. You need to erase it and then provide back some sort of affirmation or attestation to the consumer or to a data controller that's then responding to the consumer to say, we did this and it's done.
Very cool. For more information on how you can comply to GDPR specifically with your data systems, check out our Resource Center.